Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mike Kotowski, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about de-escalation skills, what it's used for, what the limitations are. First, a little bit about myself. I've been in law enforcement for 22 years. In my time as a law enforcement officer, I've done pretty much every job I've wanted to do. I've had assignments in the jail, patrol work, bicycle patrol, field training officer, courthouse security, SWAT. I'm currently assigned as the training director for the agency I work for. I have been a law enforcement trainer since 2010, and I'm a Georgia Post certified general instructor, emergency medical instructor, defensive tactics instructor, and firearms instructor. So let's talk about de-escalation. De-escalation has been around for many, many years. We've known it in the law enforcement community under different names: crisis intervention training, verbal judo, and interpersonal relations. At the end of the day, it's all the same. It's talking to people. De-escalation skills can help law enforcement in gaining voluntary compliance from people, establish better community relations, and possibly also reduce the need for use of law enforcement use of force, which is a great thing. So let's talk about de-escalation. In the next few minutes, we'll be talking about the general principles of de-escalation and the limitations. I'll talk to you about when it's appropriate and not appropriate to use de-escalation skills and what it can do for the law enforcement community and the community that the law enforcement works for, so the relationship there. So at the beginning, I touched on a few of the points I'll be covering. The first item I want to cover about is what de-escalation actually is. All right? De-escalation is the use of non-confrontational verbal skills and nonverbal communication to facilitate the best possible outcome and using the minimal use of force. In 2017, the Georgia Post Council updated the yearly 20-hour training requirement for peace officers to include de-escalation as one of those training requirements. De-escalation and community policing were both added to it, which both work hand in hand. So the first point I want to talk about, de-escalation skills involve the use of non-aggressive verbal and nonverbal skills, communication skills, in an attempt to calm a critical situation. This is all in how we talk to people. Communication takes time. We need to establish the time, the rapport with the person who's going through a crisis situation in an attempt to calm them down and bring successful conclusion, peaceful, successful conclusion to the event. Almost anybody, actually not even almost, anybody can use de-escalation skills. De-escalation skills are not a law enforcement specialty. They're not law enforcement only. Everybody should know them and use them. Things to consider prior to using de-escalation skills when we're trying to talk with someone or speak with someone is our safety. We need to make sure that we're going to be safe and the people that are with us are going to be safe. We can't put more people into jeopardy in a crisis situation. Things to consider from the Georgia Sheriff's Association. It is true that not all subjects will respond to these efforts, and sometimes physical force is required. That's the unfortunate part. There are some people that don't want to listen. There are some people that are angry. There are some people that are in a rage. Unfortunately, sometimes de-escalation skills don't work. The use of physical force or compulsion is always the least desirable outcome when interacting with someone. Having been a peace officer for 22 years, I can tell you that I would much rather talk to someone and voluntarily have them go into handcuffs than me have to fight someone and force them into handcuffs. So speaking about that, de-escalation skills, when appropriate and used properly, can lower law enforcement use of force. By lowering law enforcement use of force, we reduce injuries to officers, we reduce injuries to citizens, and in general, it's a great thing, right? So benefits here, when we reduce these injuries, we reduce medical costs, we reduce medical costs to the officers, the agency, the individual being arrested, but also we're helping establish with that individual that we're willing to take the time to have that interaction, to understand that we're not there to hurt them. Law enforcement officers and citizens all need to be aware that de-escalation tactics are always not appropriate for all situations. Right? Any situation that involves immediate and ongoing violence or threats of violence, immediate danger to themselves or the public, may not be appropriate for de-escalation tactics. Things that we need to consider prior to using de-escalation tactics: type and severity of the crime, intoxication of the subject, mental state of the subject, and where we are. Or in a public venue, if there's lots of things going on, it may not be appropriate. So sometimes we just need to consider that a peaceful resolution is not always going to happen. And that's just, unfortunately, the way things are. Time is always a consideration also. Yes, we want to take everybody into custody peacefully. We want every situation to end peacefully. But sometimes time won't allow us to. Right? So we need to consider where we are. Is the situation taking place in a subdivision? Are school buses coming home? Are people trying to walk around their neighborhood? Is it a mall? Is it a crowded area? So sometimes de-escalation may not be appropriate. So if the public can be taught what de-escalation training really is and what its limitations are, perhaps then they'll understand the difficulties that law enforcement faces when dealing with people in these critical stress situations. Right? Once there's a broader understanding, a more concrete bridge can be built between public safety and the community, where both parties can then work together for a safer community. De-escalation requires officers to move away from that traditional stance of just the facts that we've always seen growing up on TV and whatnot. Officers and the public need to understand sometimes it can be difficult to get to that root cause of what's going on, but we all need to show a level of empathy and understanding. We're all human. We all go through troubled times, right? So we need to try to work towards that. It's a useful tool for us to use, and given the opportunity to calm a situation, because it allows for law enforcement not only to establish that rapport and that communication with the individual, but also allows them to formulate a plan and withdraw to a safer area if necessary. De-escalation is good in helping build a community support. It works along with our community-oriented policing principles in helping establish that good community rapport. So in conclusion, de-escalation skills and tactics are a useful tool for law enforcement officers as long as law enforcement and the public understands the limitations and the constraints for which de-escalation tactics can be used and should be used. It's a useful skill for everybody. De-escalation skills can reduce the need for law enforcement use of force. It helps gain voluntary compliance from people and establishes better community relations, since once it's understood what de-escalation skills are and what the limitations are. And the third and most important one is de-escalation techniques and skills are useful for anyone to use in life, regardless of their occupation, as long as we know the limitations. Remember, we all have had our own trials and tribulations in life, and most people just need someone to listen to and someone to empathize with. Thank you.